sitting here with Josh Dysart, the writer of the Age of Conan comic that we're giving away at the convention, and that's a prologue to the series Conan and the Midnight God that Josh is doing with his longtime collaborator Tony Rodriguez. That'll be coming out in December this year. So Josh, writing Conan is a lot different than a lot of other stuff you've done. So what's it like getting into that character?
It's really interesting. We were talking about earlier how what's most fascinating to me is the decisions that are answers to the problems with Conan are things that I would never normally do. You know, his solution is the sword. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, his solution's the sword. His solution is violence. And that's really interesting. It's fun to write a misogynistic work.
Yeah. Y'all want to do your time doing that.
Yeah. Especially now, it's never more relevant. Misogyny
and
warhawkism. Yeah.
So the series that we're doing, 5-issue series called Conan and the Midnight God. Talk a little bit about the story, about where you're going to go with the character.
Excellent. It's a King Conan story, which is really fascinating to me. Conan at 46 years old. I'm really interested in what Conan's midlife crisis looks like. So that's part of it, you know. Instead of buying a sports car and banging a chick half his age, he kind of marches a 5,000-man army to the Stygian border, and we roll from there. And we get into the history of Stygia, which is really interesting to me. The pre-human history of Stygia that Robert E. Howard was always talking about in his books, but never really elaborated on, which gives me a lot of freedom. And that's what the series looks like.
The series takes place shortly after Hour of the Dragon, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, about a year after Hour of the Dragon.
So it doesn't pick up directly on the events of the Howard story, but it follows up pretty soon after that. Zenobia is in it as a main character. Palantides is in it.
That's right.
As a supporting character.
And so is a more mature Conan. I think that if you read Hour of the Dragon, it's a very different read than the other Conan stories. You know, even the way Howard structured it and wrote it, the things that he was interested in are very different. And so I'm trying to tap more into that than the younger Conan story.
Yeah, one of the things I love about the character is that he really changes. We get all these stories from Howard set in different periods of Conan's life. And at this late date in his life, he's a much more mature guy. He's much more prone to, he'll still react to his emotions, but there's some thought behind it, and there's some planning, and there's a lot of experience behind it, which we see borne out in that. Actually, in the first issue, we start with a flashback to the Battle of Venarium, his first encounter with war when he was like 15 years old.
That's right, yeah.
And that will wind up being echoed with him leading this massive army, the most powerful army in the ancient world, on his attack on Stygia.
Yeah, and youth plays a big part in the series too. You know, he doesn't necessarily reminisce on his youth because that's not what Conan does, but the story itself reminisces on youth, and you know, the narrative itself is obsessed with age and youth and mortality.
Yeah, one of the major themes of Conan is his sort of he's going to rebel against civilization, and so when he becomes king, it's kind of an uncomfortable fit for him to be king of the most advanced civilization of the world at the time.
Absolutely.
When he doesn't care for civilization at all.
He has a great distrust of it.
Right. So in this story, he gets to get away from that. He kind of throws off all of his kingly duties and dresses down a little bit.
Yeah.
And switches out his ornate, royal sword for a chunky piece of steel.
Yeah, soldier's weapon. Well, and one question is that he doesn't. Well, there are certainly events that affect him, and it's a traditional Conan story in that sense. One question is how much he doesn't manipulate the situation himself, so that he can go off and kind of throw off the trappings of civilization and run around in a loincloth.
Yeah, there's a huge conflict between the rest of the world and Stygia at this point, but Conan definitely rushes to it and possibly exacerbates the whole thing in order to get this break from, throne rooms and council meetings and stuff.
That's right. Yeah. Fat envoys.
Right. From So it's not purely a military comic either, though. We've got the first issue to get into some good monsters. What other kind of stuff can we expect?
Yeah, great monster stuff. A lot of rugged individualism from Conan, which is very interesting, and that's kind of what's cool about it is we start him as king, and it's very difficult for him to express that rugged individualism when he's surrounded.
When he's leading an army of 5,000 people.
Precisely.
He sort of creates a situation where he can be out there pretty much on his own, being the lion.
Yeah, absolutely, and Right? I have no idea what the question was, but but that's what, you know, we can expect that. What you'll see is you'll see him both in charge of an army and both expressing that rugged individualism, and we'll kind of get our cake and eat it too. That way, you know, we get to show massive battles, and we still get to show Conan, you know, expressing that sense of solitude that he seems to respect. And he seems to, you know.
No, recently, one of the big miniseries that we did recently was a 4-issue thing that Kirk Busiek, Len Wein, and Kelly Jones did, exploring Thoth-Amon's history, and it was the first time in the comics that we've addressed Stygia. So your story will be the second time we did Stygia, and in that series, Thoth, as a much younger wizard, was trying to raise Acheron in Stygia. He was in the capital of Stygia, Memphis. He was trying to raise the ancient civilization of Acheron back up to tap into the power of the old gods. And there's some of that same material played.
We speak very much to that. Yeah, absolutely. And it takes place quite some time afterwards too. So we kind of see, what I'd like to do is depict a Stygia that has been economically ravaged and socially ravaged by Thoth-Amon's ambitions over this time. And of course the solution, as all governments are so cyclical in their politics, you know, the solution is to go back to that first attempt, you know, and to try to do this again.
Yeah, the greatest might that the land's ever known was Acheron.
That's right. And so you constantly struggle to re-achieve that.
And that would be disaster for the whole rest of
the whole rest. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, and they're going to succeed to a certain extent. In that, I'm really interested in depicting Stygia sliding backward in time. You know. I think that's very interesting, and especially as Conan, and this is an old narrative device, but I think it's stayed with us because it works. But Conan, well, I like the idea of him descending backward into not only just the history of Stygia, but, you know, the history of his world too. Because I view Conan as kind of a bridge between civilization and Neanderthalic man. You know, he's this kind of strange Promethean Neanderthal.
Yeah, and we were kind of saying that tone sort of draws him a little bit of the Neanderthal.
He does, yeah. His face, he gives him like heavy jowls and big forehead, and I like that idea. So it's very interesting to me to play up on that notion and have him descend, you know, almost literally backward in time, and to deal with an even darker age. You know, the Midnight God. I mean, it's,
what is the Midnight God?
Well, without giving away too much, the notion of the Midnight God is this concept that if civilization is the dawn of man, then the Midnight God is that thing right on the other side of that, you know, sleeping right before the final hour of darkness. You know, that's the Midnight God. It doesn't really work since, you know, the sun comes up around 5, but just that doesn't. The 4 a.m. God just didn't work.
We tried that. We ran that by Richardson. He didn't like it. All right. Yeah, wait, a lot of words. All right. Well, thanks, Josh. And first issue comes out in December. It's the creative team that did Violent Messiahs quite a while ago. And Josh has been writing Swamp Thing for DC, and he's been doing some other stuff for Vertigo. And now he's going to be doing a lot of stuff with Dark Horse. Thanks a lot.
Ding.
Ding.